Hi folks, Seth Leapson here. Thanks for watching my monologue. In these uncertain times, you may be thinking about personal protection. If you are, I urge you to visit my friends at Guns Etc. They'll help you find the perfect protection for yourself and your family, and they can even teach you how to use it. They've been protecting Arizonans for over 33 years, and they stand for the great principles this country was founded upon. Or you can just click on gunsetcetera.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back and happy November 12th, 2020. Quote, I never thought that could happen in this country. How do you elect a person president, then all of a sudden give him the authority to be dictator? That's what Hitler did in Germany. Close quote. That was James Clyburn yesterday. He is the majority whip in the House of Representatives, the party's number 3. In August, Mr. Clyburn said Donald Trump was more like Benito Mussolini than Hitler. I guess it took 3 months, more Trump tyranny, for Mr. Clyburn to realize he had dialed or defined dictatorship down. But perhaps not so fast. It was back in March Mr. Clyburn was describing the Republican Party and said, quote, I used to wonder, how did the people of Germany allow Hitler to exist? But with each passing day, I'm beginning to understand how, and that's why I'm trying to sound the alarm, close quote. I was speaking of this sort of thing yesterday in how the media and nearly the entire culture could engage in the political and messaging tactics they have for the past 4 years. When the side you don't agree with, our side, is placed outside the universe of respectable, no less tolerable, political thought, you can do anything you want to them. Anything. A tyrant in power, after all, is the natural right condition to engage in justified revolution. Our Declaration of Independence instructs on this, after all, doesn't it? Quote, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Close quote. What ends? Well, the Declaration of Independence calls the ends rights, and they are, all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Then we learn and know, or used to know, that, quote, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, close quote. But once that ends, when leaders of governments become destructive of those ends or rights, there is a right of the people to alter or abolish it. That's what our Declaration of Independence says. There is nothing more destructive of the rights and ends that the Declaration speaks of than fascism, Nazism, or for that matter, communism. And so when a political opposition shovels us into one of those camps, usually the first two, particularly fascism and Nazism, you set the conditions for revolutions, the right to revolution. And that can justify practically anything, including, one might imagine, adjusting or tinkering with or irregularizing elections. But it certainly would include using the mass media and our education system to anathematize and marginalize opinions and points of view, positions of those camps we now belong to. The camps of the Untermenschen, the irresponsible, the ancien regime. The great historian Simon Schama described the ancien regime of yore as, quote, a society so encrusted with anachronisms that only a shock of great violence could free the living organisms within. I give you the shock by giving you our media and education institutions, and yes, our political movements of most prominence, from Antifa to BLM. I give you the Democratic Party. It's not being overstated here, the reductio ad Hitlerum. James Clyburn is not alone. Nancy Pelosi called our federal troops, dispatched to Portland to vouchsafe federal courthouses, stormtroopers. She said this summer, Republican negotiations on ballots were giving her a Sophie's choice. Back when the Tea Party was ascendant, she said she saw swastikas at Tea Party rallies. She didn't. I mean, she didn't see them. She said she did, but they didn't exist. And of course, she called Donald Trump a racist on the floor of the House of Representatives. We thank Steve Hayward for the history that following Newt Gingrich's landslide in 1994, Representative George Miller, D. California, said it's a glorious day if you're a fascist. Representative Charlie Rangel, D. New York, on GOP budget cuts under Gingrich, quote, Hitler wasn't even talking about doing these things. Representative Major Owens, Democrat. These are people who are practicing genocide with a smile. They're worse than Hitler. Worse than Hitler. Our own Secretary of State here in Arizona, Katie Hobbs, tweeted in 2017 that Donald Trump's supporters were neo-Nazis. Then, of course, there's Vice President Joe Biden in 2012 saying that mild-mannered Mitt Romney wanted to put black people back in chains. You have Jimmy Carter, an ex-president, calling the current president, Donald Trump, illegitimate. Or Joe Biden only this week, 2 days after saying our time of division is over and we should see our opponents not as enemies but Americans, saying Americans who opposed Obamacare were far-right ideologues. This week. And not a single Republican voted for Obamacare, let's remind. So that's a awfully big category far right has become to the self-presumptive president-elect who speaks in high tones of uniting the country, isn't it? Much like his claim to call for peace and calm Saturday night, his claim we all unite is not exactly hypocritical. It's definitional. As Hillary Clinton herself put it 2 years ago, quote, you cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. That's why I believe if we are fortunate enough to win back the House and or the Senate, that's when civility can start again. But until then, the only thing that the Republicans seem to recognize and respect is strength, close quote. It's quite easy to call for calm or civility when it's you who are the leader, for it's your leadership that otherwise would presumptively subject to the incivility or protests or riots or frenzy. So you see, peace and calm or civility is conditional to the Democrats and the rest of the left. To be had or imposed only once the left or the Democrats are in charge or in power. Not before. Before is revolution time, and by any means necessary. And they tell us or lecture us that our politics is broken and that things have become too extreme. Of course, it's we who are always blamed for it, as if businesses needed to be boarded up to stop us, as if federal troops and police were needed to stop our rioting and torching of the streets and cities of America, as if it's we who marched this week in Washington with the bleeding head of Joe Biden on a pike. That was the left and Donald Trump. As if we produced plays and videos calling for the assassinations and beheadings of Joe Biden. That was the left and Donald Trump, too. As if we call their leaders tyrants. That was Ilhan Omar calling Donald Trump one from the front of the U.S. House of Representatives. And support of a tyrant is what the Democrats and the left, or to many of them, see in us, in our backing of Donald Trump. Hence the call for lists of supporters, from MSNBC hosts to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to Washington Post writers to others. Lists. We belong on lists, so there can be a great purge. Or as if we must face tribunals, perhaps like Nuremberg, as they say it, so that we don't work again. We have to declare our membership in a party, it seems, a la the USSR, to get what Russians called propiska, a work permit. Just as Václav Havel described Czechoslovakia in 1978, where storekeepers had to hang the sign "Workers of the World Unite" in their windows, because in Havel's words, that is the way it has to be. If the storekeeper were to refuse, there could be trouble. He could be reproached for not having the proper decoration in his window. Someone might even accuse him of disloyalty. He does it because these things must be done if one is to get along in life. It is one of the thousands of details that guarantee him a relatively tranquil life in harmony with society, as they say. Close quote. In harmony with society. One might even say peace or calm or civility, or the opportunity for work. As I say, none of this is really new. It's just more voluble, and it's become more common. You didn't used to have congressmen and congresswomen talking this way. The Democrats of 1968 and 1972 wanted no truck with their radicals like the Weather Underground or Black Panthers. Today, the Democratic Party relies on them and has absorbed them. This, of course, is why we must fight. And by fight, I mean file court claims. By fight, I mean legally and non-violently protest. By fight, I mean putting our shoulder to the wheel and pointing out where they are wrong and where we are right. By fight, I mean donating to and supporting the Senate races in Georgia. By fight, I mean recruiting candidates for and running for school board and taking back our schools and education system. By fight, I mean never feeling we have to be on the defense in defending America and classical American values, virtues, and history. As Barry Goldwater, the subject of similar slanders as Donald Trump, knew that conservatives had to, in his words, grow up and work to fight to take the country and party back, which we did, we must do now again. If we lose this presidential race, we'll do it again. If we win it, we still must continue the fight. For as Václav Havel put it, the profound crisis of human identity brought on by living within a lie is a crisis that can only be seen as moral. So we grow up, we fight, and we get to work, with no embarrassment or hesitation or doubt. We know who they are. Let us make sure we are resolved to remain who we are. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.